So basically this is one of the software versions of the actual we can actually use, and you can go to waterfall display, you can go to spectral, you can look at your scatter, basically different bits and pieces. You can actually type in your call sign, and you can also receive the call sign of the actual stations actually transmitting. You saw on one of the videos, you saw the call sign and some information coming up in text at the bottom. Well, that's what you can actually use. So it's actually quite good. And on here, you can set your levels on your radio to make sure you get the level in the level bar okay. You can actually reset the bit error rate if you've been playing around with things. If the radio goes into sync, you can actually automatically sync, and you can see the quality of the best signal to noise ratio on there. I'm going to come around here, it's easier. It's squelch settings can be done here. Now this is digital squelch in preference to your analog squelch, so you can turn your squelch open on your radio. You don't need to put squelch on. I know some of you don't believe in it because you like to listen to all that racket. So it's actually quite useful at times. And this is where you select the actual different baud rates. I mean, this has got the experimental 1600 in. It's actually 1200 now. And then basically on here, once you set up, you've got your PTT button, etc, etc. You can also run it in Vox if you want to. This software works on VHF as well. Now when I'm saying VHF, I'm talking UHF channels as well if you wish, and you can go through all your audio config for setting in. Now obviously I had different resolutions on my screen to what's coming through the projector, so I just have to drag them down a little bit, but so you can see where these adjustments can be made. You can set your PTT for whether you got high, low, whether you're using digital or basically analog ones. You can select DTR, the usual things you actually get. And you can also do, if you're doing a CQ call, you can also pre-record a CQ calling file on there. So if you don't want to sit there calling CQ all the time, you can quite craftily now set it automatically. And then when somebody answers, you can stop it. So basically here are...
So would you need 2 inputs and 2 outputs on your laptop then?
Right, as far as the laptop is concerned, for actually, you mean for connecting to the actual radio itself?
Yeah.
Okay. You will need two sound sources. You need one which drives the actual radio, if you're using a laptop to actually deliver it, or you can, and using a headset through the PC. So you'll have your headset, and you'll have basically your sound output, which will be used for feeding the radio.
So you could use a USB headset and
yeah, you could use a USB headset if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, where I usually plug into my PCs is little USB external audio adapters. Now I prefer to use the USB audio adapters mainly because they're isolated as far as the radio is concerned from the PC. It also means as well that the sound quality and signal to noise ratio is much better, whereas if you use the actual audio provided that's on board in the PC, it tends to contain a fair bit of mush from the digital noises of the PC itself. So using USB little sound card adapters, they're only tiny little things. You pick them up for $5 at a time. On most PCs, particularly the older ones, is much better. the more modern PCs, they tend to be reasonably good, but not everybody has a super duper new PC. It's when we look at the amateur radio trade, I think the average PC is about 10 years old, if not more.
Does this program have the ability to use modern HF radios which have their own USB output? Their own USB.
It's just a USB audio codec, so you just
That,
inside.
yes, it will just, because when you actually connect your radio to the PC and you actually load the software in that comes with the actual radio, I'm thinking here of the Yaesu ones, it actually puts a virtual sound card in there.
Yeah, I mean, one of mine has the same. But
Yeah.
then this program must have a library of radio models to set up the PT.
No, it doesn't. It picks up the driver.
Yeah.
You've
It's
already,
just a sound card
for the virtual
Hold on.
sound card. It
So
picks up the driver of the virtual sound card you've installed on the PC. So when you install the radio's control
yeah.
system, you also install the drivers and
Yeah.
the virtual sound card files as well.
Yeah, I understand.
So this piece of software was shown in the second video, so it's a kind of standalone program running. And the first video we saw is kind of using flex radio, so SDR. So and is it sort of plugins available for different SDR softwares?
Right, okay. Well, for the flex radios, because you're allowed to sort of install your own firmware as a modular concept, there is a version of the software for
I see.
loading into flex.
Anything for Hermes, if you know?
Well, most of it, it's mainly been sort of tested, mainly flex is one of them. Several of the SDR radios which are on the market at the moment, which are just additional plug-in files you can actually load into the radio's configuration. But a lot of the testing's been done on ICOM, Yaesu radios, which is primarily sort of what it was targeted for. Okay.
This is quite embarrassing when you're listening to a data mode segment and then somebody is driving in from their main sound card up and you hear the usual Windows operating system noises.
Yes.
Because they've mistyped a key or something. It's a bit embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the beauties if you use USB sound card adapters. You don't get that noise.
Yeah, don't set it as your default audio outputs and they
Yeah.
don't get handled the Windows.
Yeah.
settings,
Because a lot of the operating noise you actually hear in those modes and that are where people have used the straight line input or the audio output direct on either the PC or laptop or whatever.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed, and I don't know if you have the same thing with your software, is that when you transmit the audio frequencies that you use, for example WSJT, you can ask it to go into what's called split mode, which means that it only uses audio in the range 1.5 to 2 kilohertz, which means the second and third audio harmonics and so forth are outside of the passband of the rig and therefore aren't transmitted as RF.
Mm.
And you see a lot of people who don't do that, and you can actually see them wiping out all of the harmonics from their audio if it's overdriven.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
So you could presumably use the signalling as your interface between the radio and the laptop if the radio doesn't have its own USB.
Yes, you could use.
Because that's a sound card.
Yes.
You could use a signaling. No problems at all. Especially if you got the USB one.
Oh, well, is there another one?
Yeah, the earlier ones were straight into
I'm
the
talking
line.
about using the signalling USB,
Yeah.
which is its own proper
It's
sound card.
it's just
Yeah.
a USB audio driver.
Because
It's
there-
DTT.
thousands of people have got those.
Yeah, you can use those without any problems
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, fine.
It's just if you use the earlier versions, which is
Yeah.
why I particularly made it, then sometimes you get the problems of the sound card outputs from normal PCs. You
Yeah.
get a lot of background noise as well. And on here, this particular screen, you can actually see the frequency responses and gains of the actual sort of the microphone equalizer on it. Whether you want more bass, more treble, mid-range, etc., you can enable it or disable it. So if you wanted to improve your sound in digital mode, you certainly can do.
Is that send or receive?
Sorry?
Is that send
You can. That's a send.
Yeah.
and that's the receive side.
I've got it.
Okay, and that's the microphone card, so you can actually see the speech on there, and the speaker output, which is the receiver one. So you can actually do those without too much problems at all.
Can I throw in a spanner in the works on this? Because like many people in my age group, the HF, my hearing HF is falling by the day.
Mm-hmm.
And of the two transmissions, in spite of the higher noise floor, I found the SSB one easier to listen to than the digital one, which went at about 1.5 kilohertz or something. There's just no brightness, no top, no bite in the voice at all.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now, is that, can you improve that with your
Yes.
graphic equalizer?
Just by changing the graphic equalizer.
But that's coming.
Just to interject, I've been following David Rowe's work on this for quite a few years. In his latest stuff on his blog and his website, he's been modifying the codec to enable transmission and reception of frequencies up to 8 kilohertz in the audio.
Yeah.
And the quality of what goes through is absolutely superb. It's way better than FM.
Yeah.
And I'm like you, I really struggle to understand the decoded digital. And for the first time listening to his stuff, I can not only understand it, but I think it's perfect. So this is coming, and it also fits within the same bandwidth. So just
Technology improvement.
absolutely.
Yeah, this, as I said at the beginning, this is continuously being upgraded. There are radio amateurs from different parts of the world have been working on it, have been adding it to it, and making changes. Audio responses have been changed. Basically, sort of, there's things like pre-emphasis, de-emphasis being added to the digital signal to help improve the responses. There's also, on one version of it, there has been one which is being made to work with the hearing devices, where basically it actually puts it out on the sound. So as long as your sound card is able to deliver the output to the emitter device, you can actually sort of listen to it quite nicely on the hearing systems.
Do both stations have to be on the same version of FreeDV code? I mean, you say there's a new version coming out. Do you both have to have the same version?
On the first 3 versions of it, then the answer to your question was yes, you had to be on the same version. On the latest version that's out, it's backward compatible. Okay, and it will automatically adjust to the one that it detects.
You don't have to know what the other station's using.
No.
Alison, on the wide bandwidth, what's the phase distortion like? Could you send pictures over it? Could you send video?
No, you can't send video, it's not wide, but you could send slow scan.
Well, I was thinking of 39 TV, you see.
Yeah.
This is on a bandwidth, you get away with about 6 kilohertz. But there's got to be no phase distortion.
Yeah.
Put a square wave in at say 1 kilohertz, you can't tolerate too much ringing.
Suggested talks to
The
the
phase
others,
the phase
Alison,
distortion
ask for
on the
favour.
latest version of software is extremely good, indeed. But a lot of it isn't necessarily due to the actual software, it's due to the radio itself and where you feed it into the radio. Because the problem you've got is that, let's say for instance we take the ICOM radios, the latest version of it, when the audio goes in from your microphone, it converts it to digital mode and then sends it through and does its different bits and processes it before it gets modulated. But if you use the adapter at the back of the radio, it doesn't go through the same processing before it gets transmitted. Right? Yeah. So what happens is if you feed it through the mic input, then you get all kinds of group delay and phase delays on it, which can cause a lot of problems with this.
In my case, I've got a special transmitter, because I mean I've transmitted 30-line pictures across to the Atlantic on zero.
Yeah.
With a bandwidth of, well, probably about 6 kilohertz, 7 kilohertz.
Yeah. So
Has anybody tried to take advantage of the gaps between syllables of speech? Because you're transmitting power 100% of the time. There must be some gaps that you can take advantage of. They're wasted otherwise.
There are a couple of gaps which are used, and this is where the additional data stuff will be sort of interleaved on the actual system eventually. They are coming, but just watch for the sort of releases. If you go to freedv.com, where you can download all the software and the source code files, then basically you get all the latest add-ons. At the moment, they've got the text messaging, which can be used, okay? So you can actually be sending your text or decoding your text as you're going. You know, a lot of people want to do that, but why, if you're talking to them, I don't know, but basically some people feel the need for it.
What I was wondering was whether there's any way of making the error correction improve as you slow down your speech to try to make yourself understood at the far end.
Yeah, there has been a major improvement on the error correction, which is actually being used in. Also, we're basically sort of, it's monitoring the actual signal quality and making automatic adjustments to actually suit. For instance, on this board, which I use for both commercial and the amateur radio version of it, there's two different bits of firmware going there. On the amateur one, it's basically directly encoded. Okay, so it's really basic, but they're improving that dramatically. Whereas on the commercial ones, we transmit a subcarrier, which then measures signal strength, the signal quality, the signal to noise ratio, the phasing effect, fading and so forth, and makes corrections accordingly. A lot of that is being brought in on FreeDV at the moment. Okay? Okay? So you can have, for instance, an S9 signal one moment, and then you go down to S1, and you can't copy it, can you, on SSB? But if you're on FreeDV and using that, if the signal fades in the background, you don't lose the comms. As far as the audio is concerned, it's exactly the same signal. Okay?
What radios on the market have got this system in it taking digital HF, and what radios can you buy?
A lot of the flex radio is one, which was mentioned earlier, so I presume somebody's got that. A lot of the digital radios which are on the market at the moment, you can load the software in. It's an option to load in, and you can load it in and do that. Other than that, you would either use the PC one version, or you can have a little digital board and you can actually install it yourself into some of the older radios that don't take all this modern sort of programming software stuff. So you can actually sort of do it that way, and just find a place where you can put a programming lead into it via a 3.5mm jack or something, and basically you can remotely program it accordingly. It's,
how long do you think, or do you think there would ever become a time where on amateur radio you'll sound like you're sitting in the same room as somebody?
It's fastly approaching. It's practically there now.
I think it depends, Jack, because if you're one of these mad people that likes to work very weak exotic signals, in fact the fact that you can hear it in high quality probably means that you're not actually going for an exotic enough path. People who want to push the edge will always be faced with weak signal working, and they won't use voice at all. They'll use low bandwidth.
The hardcore won't disappear.
No.
I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
How much does the magic box with all what you showed, is that
Right. The one I showed earlier which basically sort of, if I go back to the presentation one.
Yeah, and there's
That one? That one, complete and made, is around $200 as a complete kit. This particular one is can be shipped either from Australia or from Hong Kong, because that's where they're made. These particular boxes. So basically, sort of, if you take the Hong Kong box, then it's slightly cheaper, sort of on the postage. I think the postage is about £15, something like that.
How do you plug that into your radio?
You have basically sort of the sockets here. These are 3.5mm sockets, which are actually used for that purpose.
audio in and microphone, etc.
So you would make up a lead that couples that to your microphone socket on the front panel, which hopefully has got an audio out as well, or you use your...
Or if you look down the list, you'll see there's a whole list of leads ready-made up options which you can purchase as well. Yeah, that's right. It's all done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's nice. That's an external kit. If you want to. If you're not. Now, as far as the PC, there's a Windows version and there's a Linux version, which I'm sure will make a number of you happy. Okay. So basically, sort of, that's readily available without any problems.
What sort of SQL power does it need?
Sorry?
What sort of SQL power does it need? It's running on a Raspberry Pi.
There hasn't been a version of the code done for Raspberry Pi yet, but I don't see any reason why not.
You could be the first.
Right? It's been expected somebody would do it, especially with the latest version of Raspberry Pi. But basically, at this moment in time, it hasn't been done.
There's a huge amount of problems supporting the sound devices on the Raspberry Pi with proper open source software. There are lots of proprietary hacks which some of the distributions ship, but getting the full support in is an ongoing project.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. If you put a lot of distributions on, there is no sound at all because the kernel can't support it yet.
Right.
And that work is ongoing.
Okay.
Is the Microsoft version update proof?
That was a rhetorical question.
Well, put it this way, I've run it on 98 on XP and Windows 7 and Windows 10.
Yeah.
I haven't tried Windows 8, I skipped that one altogether. Okay?
Alison, as the whole system is being rapidly updated and worked on, how do you upgrade this with updates? Because obviously that's out of date as soon as you've got it.
It just connects to your PC.
Yeah, and you can run an update.
And you just download the firmware and load it in. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Alison, what is it exactly called, that box?
This one is the 200 series box.
200 series what? What's the name?
It's FreeDV 200. It's as simple as that. Sorry?
Free.
Oh, these?
No, free.
Free.
Is it cost you nothing? Not free.
These particular boards are going for, with the program loaded and tested, it's around about 110. So basically sort of, that's dollars, so it's equivalent to about, say £90. Okay.
On a day-to-day basis, how many people will you find on HF doing digital voice, and is it increasing quickly?
It's increasing rapidly. There are plenty of nets in the UK now on FreeDV. If you listen on Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock, you'll hear the GB2RS news. It's also transmitted on 3.64 on 80 metres using FreeDV, and basically so it's been tried and tested. There's lots of nets from Europe. One of the biggest nets is in Holland, so if you like to talk to the Dutch, you'll find them around 3.7s, somewhere around about that.
Has anybody worked the other side of the world? So Australia.
Have a bad cough to make the
Yes. No problems at all.
It's some RF there.
Yeah, you basically get just as far as you do on, you know, sort of, if you can work it on SSB, you can work it on this. Okay.
Alison, what would you hear on SSB if you picked up this signal?
Hiss.
It's just a hiss. Yeah.
A narrow band hiss?
Yes, it's just a narrow hand hiss.
Yes, because I was just thinking, you know, sometimes on that 80 metres around that sort of frequency, you think, well, am I treading on anybody?
Yeah.
Alison, just going back to the Australia thing, I remember when we had the DRM talk with the Radio Mondiale or whatever it is, they were saying on the very long paths, if you had multi-path, it had a lot of problems decoding it. I just wondered if that was the case here. You know.
It hasn't been experienced to date.
Right. Interesting.
It's a lot narrower though, isn't it?
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, the difference with the broadcast stuff is the bit rates are different, and the bandwidth is considerably different. And the higher your bit rate, the more errors you have over long path, and the more prone it is to sort of phasing and multipath distortions and things like that. But because we've actually got this down now to around about average about 700 bits per second, it basically sort of is stable as a rock generally. Okay.
What's it look like on a Morse ball? I mean, the JT roads are very distinctive. You can see which one it is. Does this have a distinctive pattern?
Yes, it just almost looks like almost a solid line with just frayed bits on the end. Yeah.
It's done right.
Yeah.
Is there a particular frequency for it as well?
On the ready-made boxes, Alison, at one point there was a project to make a speaker mic with press-to-talk on the side to plug into any rig. Did that get anywhere?
Yes. Done that. Got that available as well, but not for the amateur radio version. It's for commercial versions only at this moment in time.
And if it was an amateur version, it would probably suit Jack quite nicely.
Well, I've been thinking of doing the software for the sort of hand mic, but at this moment in time I just haven't had the demand for it, so it just hasn't really been worthwhile, especially on the commercial market, which is what those mics were made for. So that is basically held up development on that, and the hand mics haven't been as popular as either the external boxes or the internal cards. So it's you know, the hand mic was a great idea. Sort of it was done for a purpose, because people said, oh well, why don't you do this, why don't you do that, can you do this, can you do that? Yeah, sure, okay, and then they didn't buy it. So it's just one of those things. I mean, if basically sort of anybody asks the question, can you do me a mic and things like that, then we'll probably look at it. But at this moment in time,
mic input
not.
on the box though.
Sorry?
Isn't that a mic input on the box?
Yeah.
That's a hand mic input.
Yeah, just an ordinary hand mic.
Yeah.
Now,
You've just got to carry the box in your pocket then.
what was being spoken about is that it's literally a hand mic, normal PTT, but it's got the PCB board and everything inside coming out in the speaker inside, and then it plugs into the socket at the front and also loop round to the audio output round the back, unless you've got audio output coming out the mic sockets as well. Some radios do, some don't.
So surely the end point of this is to have a basic radio which has got on the front a mode switch, lower sideband, upper sideband, CW, FM, DV.
Yeah.
And you just switch it to DV, pick up the mic.
Yeah.
Like, let's say a DMR radio which has got well, I know it's not a switch, but it's got FM, it's dual mode.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that, to be honest, most people, they'll play around with the software but think, I'm not going to go through all this setting up every time I want to QA. So I might be talking to someone on sideband and they'll say, can you go to DV? And I would have to say, yeah, give me half an hour and I'll fiddle around with this bloody program.
Well, the beauty...
whereas I just want to switch a switch.
Hang on a minute. You set it up once.
You set it up once.
I know.
And then it saves
but
all its settings.
unfortunately, the computer's used for so many other things. When I go back to it, it's a different COM port, or it's got I've got to select the sound source. If you're using, say, USB sound adapters, if you plug them into different USB ports, you will get a different port number. Keep it in the same plug.
Keep it in the same plug. Then when you start the software up, it will talk to it
I
immediately.
keep the signalling from the same plug, so that's fair enough.
Is there an Android port planned for this?
Oh, there's always one, isn't there?
Well, at this moment in time, no. But basically, sort of, I'm sure somebody might actually get round to do it, because all the source code is free online for you to get.
Yeah, but what's the source code written in?
Sorry?
Is it C++?
It's C++.
Whereas most Android stuff is Java.
Yes, but the whole idea is you can take the coding and modify it into the different language. So as long as you're experienced enough to do that, you can do the conversion yourself. Okay? Tony?
So, the source code includes the codec. The codec runs on whatever the host processor is. There's no NSI or separate encoding chip.
No, it's all on one chip.
So how powerful does the processor need to be?
Doesn't need to be that powerful at all. In fact, if you want the chip numbers, I'll tell you. Okay.
So what's the processor using there? Just out of interest.
Well, speed. Sorry? Yeah, somebody knows about it already. The secret is out. It's his job. Okay. So, right, any other questions at the moment?
Just asking about sort of band allocation, or do you keep SSB?
It's basically sort of, there is no specific band plan at this moment in time for the use of digital voice, but it's encouraged that you stick in or around the digital section of the band. But saying that, if you listen on the digital signal across the band, you'll find there are different nets around Europe and things like that, and the US and Australia. I mean, for instance, there's a net Sunday mornings 10 o'clock on 3720 kilohertz on sort of 80 meters, and then there's a net in South Australia on 7.177. There's another net in the US on 7177 as well. There's a 20 meter net, which is the Pacific net, which is on 14150 or 14153. So there's actually two channels used there, and they operate between 3 and 4 p.m. generally. That's local time UK. Okay. And basically, sort of, you'll also sort of, if you listen on Sunday mornings on 3.640 GB2RS News, 9 o'clock sharp. See you there. Okay.
How accurately do you need to set your frequency?
Right. You need, when you tune it in, you need to be within 100 Hertz. Okay. and then it will clamp it and track it. Okay. So it's relatively accurate for today's modern radios. Okay. I'm going to get kicked out now.
No.
It's the way you were looking.
I know people start glancing at me when they want their tea, so that's the thing. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Alison, for that brilliant talk. I would also like to plug a kit that I built a while back, the MCHF, which is, I'm not affiliated with, but anyway, I just built one, which is this. You've probably seen it before. There's a bunch of German amateurs working on the firmware for this, and that's actually got FreeDV, TX and RX built in now, and amongst other things like being able to plug a USB keyboard in and do RTTY and all sorts of stuff, without a PC that is, that's just straight. So if you like soldering and you've got good eyes, Google MCHF and build one of those because it's good fun.
Yeah, they're actually good kits, those.
Sorry about that blatantly plug, but I love it's brilliant. Since I built it, it does so much more because there's all these developers doing stuff with it, and it's on GitHub, and they're just putting all sorts of things on. It's amazing.
It's the biggest source control site in the world. About 2 million, 3 million developers.
So basically that further answers the question asked earlier, what radios are available with it on?
Yeah, this one. So
there's another one.
Thank you very much, Alison, and we'd like you to please join us in some tea. Thank you very much.